Paid for by A Common America. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. Learn more at www.acommonamerica.org.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of A Common America, the podcast. This week we speak to Pete Gosar. Pete is the seventh of 10 children. He grew up in Pinedale, Wyoming, and is the younger brother of Paul Gosar, a Republican U.S. representative from Arizona. Pete is currently the executive director of the Downtown Clinic in Laramie, Wyoming, and since 2018 has been an Albany County Commissioner, where he presently serves as chairman. We had the pleasure of speaking with Pete this week and learning about his legacy of service and the opportunities to give back to others that shape his worldview.
So, Pete, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Excited to have you here today. Let's kind of just jump right in. I was really interested to talk to you in the past a few times. We had a good conversation. And I kind of understand, since I grew up in Montana, you're in Wyoming currently. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what it was like, what politics were like growing up in the area you grew up in, and kind of how it shaped your kind of political positioning over time? That'd be a good place to start.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate the invitation and the ability to talk with you all today. Grew up in Western Wyoming. My parents were both politically active, both in the Republican Party. I think both of them had gone to the National Convention. And so I think that was a part of the upbringing, and people would stop by right on the way. It was a different kind of politics, I think. I just remember there was this guy named Bigfoot Binford, right? That's the only thing I remember, right? He was running for something. And I was a little kid, and he had this cool RV with Bigfoot Binford on the side, which I thought was awesome. But obviously his career didn't go very far. But I thought it was a really interesting way, and now in retrospect, having been a candidate, a really inefficient way to run a political campaign. I mean, I grew up in a town of 1,000. How many votes are you going to get there that you don't already have, probably? But I thought it was just a really interesting way and an introduction to politics.
And so you're a Democrat today,
Yep,
and
sure
your parents were Republicans. So when did you start to break free of that, or was there a time? Was it a lot of people when they go to university have that shift? Not always, but when did you start to feel like you were going to move more left as you got older?
Well, I guess that I started to look about the world I inhabited, and thought to myself, really, is more income inequality better? Or is some of the ideas behind the New Deal really based on sound civic engagement and sound stitching together of a fabric of different peoples and different ideologies? And so I thought that the Democratic Party had more solutions that I found I could agree with. Of course, nobody is, or very few people, I guess, are 100% this or that. And we all are kind of a mix of these things, I guess. But I just found that the solutions were what I was drawn to, and the valuing of the individual person I found to be really important.
My sister back in Indiana is an elementary school teacher, and one of the things that resonated with me as I was reading your bio, it's, if I read correctly, you were a school teacher in your past as well. How did you make the transition, or did you think of it as a transition from your role as a teacher to politics? How did you make that change?
I guess some people's lives are intentional, and then there's the rest of us. And I was a teacher in the town that I went to high school in, and so some few years later, I was teaching in the social studies room that I have been in, and it just got really confining. And so like Forrest Gump, the world takes its and you float about. And I went to flight school, and then one thing led to another, and I find myself here. I had no intention to enter politics, and but it just kind of happens, and you learn about the system a bit. You make a billion mistakes, and but I think the one thing that I've always fallen back on, and it's a trait from members of my family, is just a work ethic, and my belief that I have to be able to hear no from you one more time than you're able to say it to me, because then the next time you're going to say yes, I'm going to wear you down over time, and I think having that conversation, not writing people off, not allowing them to write you off, is a really important skill. And I think for me, it's all about solutions. Everything has a solution. Some of them are really, really difficult, or they'd have been solved already. But we kind of need everybody engaged in this, because everybody's perspective makes a bigger, richer solution set. And if you just leave it to one person, me or you, Brianna, or somebody else, then you only get their lived experience and their perspective. And certainly you come up with somebody like Brianna who have this amazing ability to solve these incredible things. I'm not that person. I need a collaborative effort to come to a better solution.
So Pete, you said, I guess when we talked before, you talked about involvement and engaging people. So based on our current situation with polarization in the country, I mean, how do you, in your area in Wyoming, I mean, how do you envision or see engagement getting better over time, if you do?
Yeah, I think you have to meet people. And I think you have to blow up the idea of what's been narrated as a politician. The person that doesn't return phone calls, the person that doesn't get back to you at emails. I try, and one of my commissioner partners try very hard to return every single phone call and every email in a timely manner. And that's, in a couple of days, I feel is a timely manner. We don't have full-time commission jobs. We have other lives and other jobs. And so I think that's oftentimes when I call somebody, they've left a message, they're really kind of taken back that I would call them. And I think, man, we've set a low bar for politicians, right? We really don't expect much, but we should start expecting more. When I go listen to people who are asking for my vote, I really don't care what their ideology is. I want to ask a solution-based question, and I don't care if it's a solution I agree with, but can they walk me down a logical path to maybe a probable solution? And then if I look in their bio and they've spent some time, now you got me. Now I'm interested. And now I think whether you're left, right, center, or whatever, you have coming from a place that makes it more likely the solution will follow.
A few years ago, in an interview, you had called Wyoming a handshake state. Do you does it still feel like that to you in the time that you've spent in politics, or just the time that you've been in Wyoming?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brianna. I'll never not believe that.
Okay.
Because if I believe that or don't believe that it's a handshake state, then I got to leave.
Okay.
And I've got to find a new place, and I'm getting pretty old to do that leaving thing. But yeah, I think it always should be a handshake. And I think it should be a handshake in Chicago. And in New York City, I think we should demand that, right? I think we have the wrong people holding political office, quite honestly. They're not interested in solutions. They're not interested in listening. They're not willing to call back the people, their constituents. So, maybe they could be on reality TV. I don't know, right? But they shouldn't be working on poverty. They shouldn't be working on healthcare. They shouldn't be working on housing. They're not serious people, and they don't have serious solutions. And I think when you get close enough to shake a hand with somebody, then maybe they feel that you're approachable, and they can say, "Hey, what about this road? Right? What are you going to do about closing that road?" I think that's important.
So what does kind of an average day look like for you? I mean, you're definitely like you said, you do your best to call people back, email, just respond to people within a timely manner. And you're right, the bar is very low for that. So, what does your day to day look like?
Well, I guess difficult question. I work in a free clinic, and so I am a
Yeah,
director of a free healthcare clinic, which is the worst business model ever. Right? We give away our services, right? But it's an amazing community model,
yeah,
and we are now 25 years in, and it kind of sets the baseline of what I think is possible. These revolutionary people in our community said people are getting left behind. You know what? We're going to give away services, and it's going to work. And I'll be damned. It does work, right? We're 25 years in. We're 10,000 people who've received healthcare from this organization, which I did not found or did not sit on the ground floor. And I think that's really possible. And I think not everything has to be a good business model. In fact,
sure.
I think community sometimes is a horrible business model. If you look at the short term impact, if you look at the long term impact, it's an amazing thing, right? When people are working with their neighbors to find solutions to the thing that troubles them both. I think that's what we have to do. I think we have to return to that and get away from the people who want to rile you up because that doesn't do anything but ruin your evening. So a day, I'll go work at the clinic, and either before that day or after, before I go to work or after that work ends, I'll go and get on my email. And if somebody's called me during the day, I have my personal cell phone number as my commissioner number because I'm just tired of carrying two phones. I'll lose them. It's twice as likely for me to lose it, right? And so,
Yeah.
and then I'll just call back and say, "Hey, how can I help you?" And then I think that the words that an old politician told me one time is like, "I don't know" is the second best answer you can give, right?
Okay.
Um, just admitting, try not to BS people, right? That's just a really bad look, and it just doesn't work. So just tell them you don't know. Nobody expects you to know everything, and then go find out and get back to them. And so um, that'll be no day is the same,
Yeah.
um, and some days are longer, some days are shorter. Uh, but I find it really interesting to meet people who disagree with me politically and say, okay, what would you do for the Boswell Road? And then I'll bring out my tablet and start writing. And I think it's important because for me, it's an easier way for me to remember. But then also, I think when I'm writing, I'm not talking. And that means I'm listening. And I think that's an important piece of the handshake that I like to think about, Brianna, in the state and the way I want to conduct business.
In our last episode, we spoke with Charlie Whelan, who was one of the founders of Unite America, and they're focused on, bipartisanship and finding the places where we agree as a society. And he spoke a lot about the political process at the local level, the municipal level, being so different from the political process at federal level, because when you're solving issues like roads and utilities and the things that affect people's day-to-day life, you're not focusing on positioning yourself and building a your own ego. You're focused on what their issues are and trying to solve those problems. And it kind of struck me, as you were talking about solutions based politics, and you spoke about the issues that you've worked with on a day-to-day basis. I just wonder if what your thoughts are on kind of the differences between more local politics, and as we go up in the layers, if you have a perspective on why that shifts and why we have some of the challenges that we have today in politics.
It's really interesting that at the local level, you're going to see people in the store, right? And if you make a bonehead move, they're going to remind you. Most people won't, but some will. And I think it's that immediacy of feedback. I'm a big feedback person. I think it's important. I think it's welcome. You hope it's kind and gentle. Sometimes it's not, and it's useful too. But I think that is missing entirely. And I don't know if I have a solution for it because the work is done in Washington, D.C. But I believe these rascals should spend some more time in their communities. And I'd really like them not to have a photo op in a soup kitchen or in a housing depressed area. I'd like them to spend some time, right? And like weeks, right? Because then I think you have a better understanding and it doesn't become such clickbait. It becomes more of, all right, now the news worn off. How do you feed 400 people today, Ted? Right? How do you do that? Right? Where do you get the food? You don't charge anybody. How do you keep the doors open? I think that's really important to know. And then I just go back to the first time I volunteered at the clinic I now am glad to be a part of. I thought I knew my community, and then the executive director said, show up, but could you show up an hour before we open the doors? And there was this huge line of people that went around the block, and it just blew my mind, right? I thought, God, I know my community. And then there was all these people who needed healthcare. And that was a real wide awake moment to me. And then also, as I moved towards the front of the door, people are like, you can't cut this line. And how important it was for them, right? And I was like, oh, I'm just volunteering. I'm not trying to cut the line. I'm just here to try to help. And I saw, standing in line at a free clinic kind of identifies you. And so somebody's gotten away with that. It's made sure everybody has appointments now. But then to challenge people who are moving ahead of you by saying, I need this so much. No, man, you're not getting ahead of me. And I think that glimpse of my community was really important to me, really important.
So, Pete, can you talk a little bit about why the clinic works so well? I mean, what kind of community support do you get? Why? I mean, I'm sure with any nonprofit, there's ups and downs and budget issues and things, but why do you believe since it's been open so long, that solution works so well for your community?
I think it's honest. I mean, from the very beginning, the people who founded it said healthcare is a right and all deserve healthcare. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty revolutionary statement in Wyoming in 2024, but think back to 1999. And the fidelity to that message has been amazing. It's easy, and the board has no problems with me going to Rotary or some other club and saying, this is who we are, this is why we do it, and this is why it's important. You should listen. And then I think it's a generous community town. And, we're pretty small as far as population goes, as far as healthcare professionals go. To have the numbers of people to volunteer their time to make us run. But for some reason they do, and they come. And I think the generosity of the community, it's not a rich community, but the generosity in resources and time, but just spirit, right? That they just believe, I can only imagine they believe that this is really important and we're just going to keep it going until we don't need it. So I don't know. I see it being a bonding experience, Mark, and I know people who send checks are Republicans. I know. They know I'm a Democrat, right? It's too small a town. But here we meet, right? They're concerned about their neighbors. I hope I'm concerned about my neighbors. And can we meet in this world where maybe it's not perfect, but it's a solution for somebody, and maybe somebody else can find another healthcare solution that's not perfect either, but will work for somebody else. And I'm with them, right? I think that it's the great equalizer for me that the check doesn't say Republican, the check doesn't say Democrat, the doctor's license doesn't say Republican, it doesn't say Democrat, or the nurse, right? They just come to help. And I'd love to see our politics return to that, to care about our community.
Yeah, because the need is there. So I guess when GM asked earlier about the difference between community and federal, on the federal level, you don't see the people standing in line or see the sicknesses they might have and need immediate help. But probably in your community, Republican or Democrat or independent, people see and know people who need help or seek help, and they can't really refute that that's a need in the community. So I'm glad it's worked out. We need that here in my hometown in Montana, actually, but maybe I'll talk to you later about how that might work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. I read a book by I think his name's Robert Putnam, and it was Our Town. And I think it talked about the divide that we're experiencing. And he said I think he grew up in Cleveland or someplace in Ohio. And when he grew up, there were doctors down the street, and there were lawyers, and people knew these people, and then they could dream to be these people. And now we've segregated poor people together and people that aren't poor together, and we've separated. And so his my takeaway from what he wrote was there's just a real lack of ability to dream. There's this real lack of seeing and meeting a doctor or meeting a nurse or meeting a CEO and go, oh, I could be that dude. I could be that lady. And so I think that there's another piece of it.
In our first episode, we talked a lot about these issues that are really, really big issues. They talk about them all the time on in political news, whether it's women's health care, the scourge of guns in schools, and some of these big issues. And when you poll people and they're not in a situation where they're having to hold their flag up, their political flag up, but you're really talking to them about how these issues affect them, we often find that they agree on more of the solution than they don't. They agree on more of the path forward, but we haven't yet made that progress. I just wondered if you have any thoughts on those big political issues, or even how we as a society can start to come back together and step away from this is the answer because this is the Republican answer, or this is the answer because this is the Democrat answer, but really, how are we going to solve these fundamental societal issues so that we can be safe in schools, we can live and thrive a healthy, happy life. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on any of those.
For me, it starts at you have to believe it's solvable. We used to do big things, and we should try them again. They're really unifying, and they're really inspirational. And so, poverty is a hard thing, and it's multifaceted to what little piece I know about it. But saying that and not doing anything is just empty to me. I mean, knowing and then not working on it is not helpful, right? And it's got to be soul crushing for people. I have I love going to work at the free clinic. I love it. It's the most hopeless place I've ever worked, and the most hopeful place I've ever worked. Right? You see people whose lives have changed because they couldn't afford surgery, and they might even die. And I've known those people in the last few years, and that's just not the America I believe in, right? But then I see people come from the hospital after a 10, 12-hour shift, and they'll do 4 more with us. And that's the America I believe in. And so we know as people, it's not all right to let people die just because of their pocketbook. It's not all right for them to suffer because they can't afford, right? It's not all right to watch people be addicted and homeless and not have access to mental health or housing. And so let's just do something, right? Whatever twists you, man, whatever passion you have, go work on it. You're enough, right? It starts with you. And if it, it started with these people in this small community, and 10,000 people later have had health care because they just said, I don't know how to do it, but we should. And they did. And I think it's really important. And I think um, you just might find that the neighbor you hated or you thought you hated is willing to help along the way too. And you might just find the humanity in each other. And then, hell, you might get somebody health care, right? You might get somebody a house, a family a house, right? Um, and that's important because I have to tell you, selfishly, I do some of this work because nobody knows who has the cure for cancer. And I know some people that are really important to me that are suffering from cancer. And I'd really like them to solve it. And if it's a little girl in Philadelphia, but we don't give her a home and she doesn't have a safe place to go to school, well, we're never going to get that answer. So it's in my best interest to help as much as I can because people did it for me. I think when I was 20, I thought, man, got all this good stuff. Look what I've done. And I didn't think about the people out early in the morning sweeping the road, clearing the rocks, making sure it was easy for me. And so I think it's time for me to start clearing some rocks because who knows what the next great idea and when it'll come and who it'll come from. And so we should bet on each other.
There's so many wonderful things about living in a small community. Um, what do you think keeps people? Well, I guess I should ask. Do you find that a lot of people who are born and raised there, they stay? I mean, there's always some people who go, but I think where I live is somewhat of like a little bit older community. Like the majority of the people who live here are over, I don't know, 60 or something like that, and so it always feels like there's this drive to like bring in young people and kind of, I don't think my community will ever have that issue because it's such a wonderful, beautiful area. But do you feel like people who are born and raised there tend to stay or want to come back? Do you see younger generations come back to your area?
So yeah, it's a double answer for you. Much of Wyoming is getting older, um, and that brings a host of problems, right? Because who takes care of people in senior citizen center? It's not other seniors. And I think some of the ideologies and some of the things that, at least I was raised in Wyoming, if if it ain't bothering you, why is it your business, right?
Mm.
It's become people's businesses now, and I think we're seeing young people leave for a number of reasons, and I think some of them don't feel welcome. I think about members of the LGBTQ community um, who worked in my clinic. They're fantastic people, and they're going to be amazing healthcare providers. But even in the place that I live, Laramie here, which is a more neutral, so it's equal Democrats, equal Republicans, a less anti LGBTQ community here. It's just they don't feel welcome, and man, I think about the loss, right? I just think about how amazing this person has been at the clinic, and how we really can't export them to Colorado, but we do it all the time. And so how do we build an economy? How do we build a like your community here who says, yeah, really, it's important for you to be here. And if you're a single mom, we're going to invest in childcare for you because what are you going to do, right? Is anybody really going to let you take your 5-year-old to work, right? Or your 3-year-old to work? How do we do that? So those are economic topics that I think about a lot, and I think maybe they're not the type of economic topics most people talk about.
But they're so important. I mean, because like you said, it's like what will it look like? That community, and communities, small communities especially, can change so quickly within 5-10 years. People come and go. I think we saw the same thing out here, which is a lot of people moved out here. It felt like a lot of people moved out here during COVID because they had the ability to work remotely. They like the idea of living somewhere quiet and being able to be outside the city. And then we see a lot of people moving back. It's there's not enough things out here. There's not enough work out here. So I think it's just something that a lot of communities, experience, these kind of smaller communities. But yeah, still, do you feel hopeful still for the future of the free clinic? Like you're seeing enough people who utilize it, obviously, and support it, that there's no, real concern of it ever becoming smaller or not being able to provide as much.
Yeah. Well, as a nonprofit director, I would say no, I never feel comfortable.
Yeah, sure.
I got to
Fair.
be honest with you. But no, we're in a good spot. And we've been intentional to be a good spot, right? So we've I've got this amazing group of people that I work with, and they're incredibly senior healthcare workers who could make more money just in the same community at the hospital, but they don't. Um, and I think we practice healthcare closer to how they envisioned being a healthcare provider than the standard healthcare. Just for instance, Brianna, we don't believe in 15-minute appointments. They're not
Mm-hmm.
useful to us, right? Healthcare is a relationship business. It's a trust business. If you don't know that person, how are you going to share with them maybe some of the most intimate parts that they really need to know to be helpful? So when a person comes to volunteer or we go to hire them, my first question to them, and it's unnerving, quite honestly, and it is, how long would you like your appointments? And exactly what you did is exactly what they do. They're like, what are you saying to me, right? I get to call my appointments, right? And I'm just like, no, you're a healthcare professional. Why would me, an administrator who has no healthcare experience at all, why would I tell you what it should be? That's just an upside down world. And so I think we're able to reimagine what a healthcare system, what a healthy healthcare system looks like, not only for the people who we are privileged to care for, but the people who give the care. We've forgotten how difficult I think it is to be a healthcare provider, especially primary care. Those frontline people, man, they got to be psychologists, they got to be cooks, and they've got to be childcare experts, and then they got to know what's wrong with your diabetes, right, and how to correct it. And so, how do we make our environments such that, man, if you got to go take care of your aging parents, you just send an email and the person goes, yeah, see you when you can get back. We'll take it from there because, man, this is life. It's really important, right, to people to see their kids and make time for their kids and make time for their parents and have a life outside of a healthcare facility. And they'll take less if they have more control. And that's my experience. And that's just a small little place. And so I think it's important. I think it's doable. I think these systems need to change. I think, interestingly, being on the outside of the system, we're much more nimble. We're much more willing to embrace change because we have to. We don't have unlimited budgets. And so how do you make a medical oxygen program with $5,000? Well, I would have had no idea, but we found people who did know how to do it. And people have gotten 30 people have gotten their oxygen need met with a grant of $5,000. And so I think it's possible, and that's why I'll always be hopeful, Brianna. I'll always be hopeful because God, there's amazing people out there, right? And amazing people that need health care, right? And if you get them some health care and you get them feeling better, you'd be surprised what kind of an attorney they were, or you'd be surprised what kind of teacher they were, or what kind of mom they were. And I'm sure that's true about food and shelter and all the other social needs.
I really appreciate your focus on helping. I think that in this time where the news is often more scary than it is not scary. I just appreciate that there are people like you who are helping and looking for solutions. I think you're absolutely right when you say that sort of mind shift to focus on solutions, to focus on helping each other at a human level. We don't have to think of the Democrat solution or the Republican solution. This is helping each other on a human level. That ultimately is the thing that helps us get through life in a really healthy way, and that gives me hope. That's motivating to me and all that we're doing, just to try to raise awareness that people can have a different view on politics and on just helping each other day to day. So I really appreciate that perspective. It's
Well,
very refreshing.
well, thanks, Jim. I think it's refreshing that you guys would not head down a path that so many people have tread with my last name, right? I mean, obviously the politics is there, right? I disagree almost 100% with my brother who's in Congress on every issue. But that's an old story, and that story doesn't help anybody out ever that I can come to terms with. And so, how do we get to the essence of it all, right? Politics was supposed to be about solving things. It was about creating space, right, for people to live to the potential, right, clearing the rocks. And why have we gotten away from finding people who want to clear the rocks, even imperfectly, right? Who want to say, this is what I think today. And if you got a better idea, then I'm going to change my idea tomorrow. Boy, those are people we should really look for. But now we call them flip floppers, right? And I think that's just silly. A nimble mind is a mind that changes, right? And it takes in new stimulus and says, God, yeah, I didn't see it that way. And I think that's important. I just had an interesting story, right? I'm an art lover, and Laramie has got a bunch of art murals. Just amazing artists here, and for whatever reason, right? It's just an amazing set. And so when they were trying to raise the money to get these murals started, they couched it as a really a beautification to the city, and then they said, well, there's an economic benefit, and I was like, come on, right? Right? No, right? It's going to make the city look good. You'll pay some artists. That's always cool. But no economics. I couldn't have been 100% more wrong, right? Because I've watched people go through these murals and walk from one to the next, and then they duck in and have dinner. And they probably have a drink with dinner, so they spend the night. And then they wake up the next morning and they have breakfast. And I could not have been more wrong. I'm sure everybody has those moments too. And so give them the space and say, look, ooh, so big deal. You know what? You didn't stop it. So now you're on board, right? Because you see how important it is from so many different angles.
Yeah, I think that's the definition of good governing, right? Is that you're there to help those who need your help to govern, to support your constituents. And if you can't admit the fact that you made a mistake and you're trying to correct it and move forward, then what are you doing in that position to begin with? And we've held politicians for quite a while now to the strange metric of you have to, everything you've said for the last 30 years has to be always right. You can't deviate from it, or as you said, flip flop. And it's an impossible situation. So these politicians probably end up being dishonest or not telling the truth or not wanting to modify for the better solution, as you said, Pete, because they're held to this unrealistic expectation by a lot of people. So we talked to Charlie about this too. We're hoping that people who are going to run for office, whether it's local or federal, state, whatever it might be, can acknowledge that they make mistakes, that they're humans as well, and that they are trying to evolve in their position or as humans or whatever with each other and make better decisions going forward. And I think the more we embrace that idea, the more solutions we'll have, like what you're doing, right? You obviously, when you started out at the clinic, even though they started before you were there, it sounded like you probably made lots of mistakes, as he said, and are improving on a daily and weekly and yearly basis. So we're hoping that kind of ideal sets in with people who want to serve or be in government.
Yeah, make them today, Mark. And I don't know that I've cut down the rate in my 10 years as the director, right? I really don't. Some things are really difficult, as it turns out. At least they're difficult for me, and they require an answer that day. Um, but then you got that night to reflect on it, right? And I think in the end, you try to do the best you can on any given amount of time, and that doesn't mean you have to be perfect. But the best you can is what you got and what you can control. And so, um, I'm a believer that people will see it, right? They'll see like, ah, God, I might disagree with that guy or that lady, but damn, they try, right? Damn, they're out there, doing things, right? I see them picking up trash. I see them shoveling sidewalks, right? Why can't the mayor do that, right? Why can't a county commissioner do that? Why can't a U.S. senator do that? I mean, there was that gentleman from New Jersey who picked up the trash in the Capitol, right, Mr. Kim, right? And I'm like, God, that was refreshing, right? Because that's what everybody else would do mostly, right? They just wouldn't let that happen. They just go
Right.
pick up
Right.
the trash and clean it up. What, why is that such uh, an amazing thing to watch when there was 435 other members that could have done the exact same thing? And so, yeah, I think just talking about our disagreements just leads to bigger disagreements. Let's just go clean up trash, man. I don't know. Let's go give people some health care. How about housing? Maybe a little food, right? That's healthy. Let's educate some people and let them reach their potential, um, because we're all better off when that happens. And so, selfishly, if you don't care about the community, if you care about just yourself, you have you have a self interest in your community being stronger, being vibrant, being educated, being engaged. And then to the people who don't think they would make a good candidate, just leave that alone. Goodbye. Go write your name on the ballot because you are enough, right? You are watching you three are meeting a person who couldn't be more regular, and has nothing really that impressive uh, to say or do or think, but somehow I got elected. And so you just got to find the right campaign team is what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
So
I often wonder, I kind of wanted maybe your input on this. I often wonder what causes people in today's world in 2024, what motivates people to go out and do what you just said? It's like, just go make it happen. Go get elected, go help, go pick up trash, whatever. I don't want to be a cynic or negative here, but I often feel like people are self-focused most of the time now. And I don't think most people believe what you just said, which is, even if you are self-focused, helping your community helps you in general. We know that's true. But I sit here and sometimes talk to GM and Brianna about how, we look at these common issues that most Americans want solved, but how do we get most Americans to recognize that these issues being solved would help their own lives, make things better for themselves and their community and everyone around them? So I'm often, I guess, stymied by just trying to understand why more people don't want to go off and pick up trash, want to go out and pick up trash or run for office or volunteer or anything else. I just I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you have some insight there.
well, probably not insight worth listening to, but I I get to do United Way discussions with members of the nonprofit community, and there's a gentleman who says, and I think it just really encapsulates it for me. What kind of community do you want? Right? What kind of community do you want? Do you want people with developmental disabilities to be cared for? Well, it just doesn't happen without you, right? Do you want safe streets? Doesn't happen without you. Um, so, what type of community do we want? And then, what are you willing to invest? We're all fairly schooled in the capitalism, and nothing comes for free, really, except healthcare at my facility. But other than that, what comes for free, right? It doesn't have to come with money. And then I'll just have to tell you the thing that I have learned in the 15 years I have been at the clinic. As far as me helping versus it helping me, I am on the way lower end of that ledger, right? That has been the single best thing I ever did, and probably will do. Um, and I think more people would find that to be true too. Um, you know, go spend an afternoon at Special Olympics and tell me if you don't laugh, and tell me if you don't root, and tell me if you don't get fully invested with what you're seeing with people you have never met, right? And so just do it. Get off the couch, right? You are enough to be the next great mayor. You are enough to be that. And if it's not you, how are we going to hear your perspective? And I think, a lot of people think that they're just, yeah, nah, I could never do that. Just do it, right? And I think locally, I find it to be really difficult days. I mean, I'm not going to lie about it. But I think it's really great, right? To invest in the safe house right here and then see them opening up another place for people who are being abused can go. And, and so you don't want to hear about subdivisions at 7 o'clock at night, right? That could get old. But then you think, man, that safe house got another place to put people. Um, and that just might mean the difference, right? To somebody having a future or not having a future. And so I think, focus. I think deciding to yourself what kind of community you want. I had the real great fortune of working, having a friend of mine. She was just an amazing human being here. And there are people in these communities that stitch these communities together, and Sue was one of them. And so we had another friend. It was her friend, longtime friend. Her name was Shirley. And Shirley called me at work one time, and I was a pilot. She said, Pete, you should get to Laramie. I was working in Cheyenne, which is not very far away. She says, you need to get here. Sue is not doing well. And I had no idea. And so I took her advice because Shirley always told me, set me straight. And I talked to Sue. But Sue had glioblastoma. And this was Friday, and Sue's died on Sunday. And so she had raised millions of dollars for every organization in this community. And so much so that when you saw Sue, you'd come out of your wallet, right? And there was just no question, right? And if you had a checkbook, she'd take checks too. Right? It makes me laugh to think what she would do in the age of Venmo and Cash App and some of that stuff. But Sue would have figured it out. So anyway, we're talking on that Friday, and she's really lucid, and she's talking to me about how she's calling all these boards and commissions to tell them that she's not going to be able to make the next meeting because she's going to be dead, right? And nobody would answer the phone because they thought she was calling for money. And she thought that was the funniest damn thing she'd ever heard. And I just like, what an amazing legacy, right? This person left, right? And at the end, she can still laugh about this thing that is so horrible, but that she has invested in her community. And then when her funeral came, there was just so many people. And there should have been so many people because she had invested her whole life in this community, and she had stitched together families and businesses, and people knew they mattered to Sue. And we all had that opportunity to be that Sue, right? And I think we should take it because I think we're shortchanging ourselves by not taking it. So you fail, right? I did it this afternoon or this morning in the clinic, and I'll do it again tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon at the clinic. But somebody, because that door is open, somebody got better too. And somebody had an opportunity they might not have had. And maybe they can live up to their potential because there's nothing prettier than the person living up to their potential. There's nothing more beautiful than that. But then it's also really ugly when they can't. And so that's why I have so much hope. I work with the most hopeful people in the world, right? They believe in free healthcare. God, what glorious optimists.